Hello and welcome to the 6+++ Show, a podcast for your wargaming and 40k needs. Hobby talk, tactics, tournament reports, lore and much more. We have it all. Please welcome your host for the evening, Tom.
Welcome, ladies, gentlemen, and salty meta chasers to that 6+++ show. Today, we are talking about balance. Balance has been, to some extent, restored. Maybe. We don't know. Someone's tried to do it. An attempt at imposing some kind of order on this chaotic, horrible game has been made. And we are going to take you through it and talk through our sort of initial opinions on what has happened, and then wildly speculate as to what we think is going to happen next. I'm joined tonight by a panel of experts, some of which are directly affected by these nerfs, some of which have armies somewhere that are affected indirectly or otherwise by these nerfs and might look at them again. Maybe they won't. We don't know. We'll find out. Chaos Demons not really changed all that much. Speaking of
we
Chaos
are the
Demons,
most irrelevant army in the entire game. So,
do you want to say hello, Lee?
Hello, everybody.
What have you been up to, Lee?
Not much. I have been, since last time we got together, I've been painting some demon engines ahead of an event I'm very excited about on Saturday.
Oh, wonderful. Scrivo Slam.
Shout out there. I'm really excited about that. So that's been my hobby focus, really. No, it's been good.
Nice. Very, very nice. And I'm also joined by Jamie. Say hello, Jamie.
Hello, everyone.
Oh, nice. And what have you been up to, Jamie?
I've been at a bit of a standstill, really, on my Blood Angels, waiting for this data slate and to see if anything changes them at all. I've got 10 Vanguard
we'll come on
veterans
to that.
I have 10 Vanguard veterans at the moment where I've yet to put on any arms on them. Just and ahhing as to the direction I want to go. So
that's relevant.
Yeah.
Interesting. And finally, we have our dear leader, Chris. Say hello, Chris.
Hello, Chris.
What have you been up to, Chris?
Hey, listen to the sadness already.
I have COVID, so stay back away from the screens.
Nogle's blessings.
Yeah, so I got slammed by that just after the event at the weekend, and it turns out COVID's not actually that nice. I assumed I was just immune. I worked with children for 2 years. Just assumed I was asymptomatic. Apparently not. So because of that, I haven't really done anything. I managed to paint some Harlequins yesterday, but today I just spent most of the time asleep. So it's been fun times.
Yeah. Well, wishing you a speedy recovery, of course. That was a bit of a double whammy to get a data slate and COVID in one
I know,
week.
right?
It's not nice.
It's like they knew.
It's like they knew.
Who knew
really
we were making such waves in
kicking you while you're down.
Community?
They heard he went 5-0 at the team tournament and thought,
yes.
Yeah,
Take him down a peg.
yes.
But I won't hold people up. I think we'll get stuck into it because this is what people are interested in. This is what we're all interested in chat about. I think WhatsApp has been a very busy place today.
Oh my God. I have to turn my phone off.
I've sent so many tiny violin meme gifts to people today. I've been firing them out left, right, and centre. It's been great. But we're going to move through it a bit at a time. We're going to start with the nerfs. There were some big losers. The Balance Dataslate has taken on some of the strong armies in the meta as things currently stand. Then we're going to move to think about a couple of other rules changes that just nerf the game more generally, or nerf certain ways of playing the game more generally in ways I think we'll agree are quite good. Then we're going to think about a surprise buff. There was a surprise buff in here for power armor of all kinds, which we'll discuss, and the potential implications of that. And then we'll think about some little buffs for Death Guard Sisters and Astra Militarum to finish before speculating about the state of the meta. So the headlines. We had some casualties. We're going to start with the Golden Boys, the Adeptus Custodes, because Chris is here, and I want to get Chris talking about this as soon as possible because I can tell he's really keen to. And the Adeptus Custodes took the following hits. First one, change the third bullet point of detachment abilities of an Adeptus Custodes detachment to read troops units in an Adeptus Custodes detachment gain the objective secured ability. In short, other kinds of infantry have lost OBSEC. You've also got add the following to Esteemed Amalgam, Emperor's Auspice, and Martial Discretion stratagems. You can only use these once. That is once, as far as I can see, ever.
Yeah,
that is it. Once. There was someone hopefully in a WhatsApp speculating maybe they mean once per battle round. It's like, I think they'd have said once per battle round if that's what they meant. Yeah. But we will see. Hopeful. Can remain hopeful. Finally, change the Adeptus Custodes keyword in all instances on the Arcane, Genetic Alchemy, and Emperor's Auspice stratagems to read Adeptus Custodes infantry, so not bikers, vehicles, and the like. Chris, do you want to very briefly spell out what this means for Custodes players around the world?
Cool. So if you remember when the Codex first came out, there was a lot of doom and gloom about how weak Custodes were. And that was obviously quite wrong. Well, the doom and gloom is probably exactly the same level this time. How right it is, time will tell. I know that all the discords and everything I'm on at the moment think it's like, the sky has fallen down. And Art of War have said they now reckon Custodes are one of the worst armies in the game, which is quite a bold claim.
It's a big claim, isn't it?
It's a very big claim. I think it's one of those things where obviously everyone hates Custodes unless they're a Custodes player.
No.
And I think unless you are a Custodes player, you might not realise how important some of these particular things are. So what has actually happened? Well, troops having OBSEC, obviously it was all infantry. So that was your characters, that was your Terminators, that was your Wardens, your Venatari, that sort of thing. So Wardens, they were quite popular in most armies for two reasons. First of all, OBSEC. Second of all, and most importantly, Bodyguard. As we'll cover, Bodyguard is no more.
Bodyguard is not what it was.
So, therefore, you're not going to see any Wardens anymore. So, if you have Wardens in your Custodes list, you're just going to get rid of them. They have literally no point. You're spending 5 points more for 1 extra attack, 6 up, feel no pain, but no OBSEC. Absolutely pointless. Second of all, Terminators. People were taking lone Alaris Terminators to be backfield nuisances. And kind of just go around and stealing OBSEC and just being a pain in the backfield, really. That's gone. Why are you taking Alaris Terminators now? I don't really see much point, to be honest. I think maybe you could take 6, and then, you get to use your strat on them to be defensive with them, I guess. But other than that, I mean, you can't engage with them, you can't rod with them, you can't do anything with them. I mean, I might still, if I have a spare 60 points, I might still keep one in, just because I find them quite handy to drop them down and just screen out the backfield or something like that. But other than that, pointless. Foot characters, again, just having that OBSEC was so valuable, especially if you've been into heroic and just chop things up. Now you've got to fully kill the unit off the objective. They just lost that bit of extra utility. I think something like the plate guy, Mr. Worldwide, I think he's probably gone. He's just not anywhere near as helpful anymore. So overall, an army where only your troops are OBSEC is obviously the same as most armies.
Yes.
But most armies have a way of giving any unit OBSEC.
Dispute.
Which we don't have. And on top of that, you've got hardly any models. I know it's double, but it's still pretty average. So I think they've lost their ability to play the OBSEC game, which massively weakens them in terms of stranglehold and those sorts of things. Yeah. In terms of stratagems, so Esteemed Amalgam is specific to Emperor's Chosen, which is the kind of the chapter tactic trait that Shield Host that most people were taking. That means you can change to a different Shield Host. People use that realistically to be able to fall back and charge by being solo watch or reduce incoming attacks from each unit by 1. Very rarely are you seeing it used more than once in a game. So not quite sure why they felt the need to do that. Wasn't overpowered in any sense of the shape or form. So the fact that you can only do it once per battle, I don't really understand why. Obviously, the main one, the big one, is Emperor's Auspice, which is no rerolls, which was the bane of many a Tau player. So it's now once a battle. Brutal.
Once a battle.
Because it's obviously you've got Dreadnoughts out in the open. You can only pick one. You can only do it once a battle. But it's not ideal. But I guess the main thing is it's now only on infantry.
Yeah, that's the big bit. That's the one.
You cannot now do it on bikes, which puts a bit of a nail in the coffin. And let's just hammer that nail home even more, because transhuman is now also only on infantry. You can do it more than once a battle, but you can only do it on infantry. So it means the bikes have lost any ability to be defensively buffed now, as have dreadnoughts. So survivability of the Custodes has gone down a lot, is basically the general thing there. And then finally, the other stratagem was martial discretion, which is the one where you can change your Qatar, so you can put a particular unit in a different Qatar. I think I've probably used that once or twice a tournament. So why has it become all of a sudden once a battle? I have no idea. I mean, it doesn't actually affect you in the long run, but I'm just not quite sure why they chose to make those differences, those changes. In my opinion, they've been too heavy-handed. I think the style of custody lists going forward is now going to be that of troop spam. You might see 1 unit of 3 bikes or 1 unit of 5 bikes. The problem with 5 bikes is that's still a nearly 500 point investment, which, you know, does it earn 500 points? I'm not entirely sure. Obviously, you know, they're still hard to deal with, right? They're still 2 up, 4 up. Your 4 ups can still spike.
Oh, definitely.
5 salvo shots with rerolls, etc. is still strong. Still going to do work. I think, in my opinion, they have gone over the top, though. And for me, the big thing is at the highest competitive level, I just don't think this army is going to be as fun anymore. I don't think you're going to see as much
Fun for who?
The player to play, because at the end of the day, firing up a bunch of troops and just sitting in objectives and trying not to die isn't particularly enjoyable at all. And that's all they've got now. Their output's not the best. They're efficient with their hitting, and that's about it. So, in my opinion, they're going to go down to a mid-tier army.
Yeah.
Feels like a less durable Deathwing with slightly less output as well.
Exactly. Well, I think also you think Marines are now just as tough with power armor as long as there's AP.
Yeah.
Like, we're on a 2 up. As soon as you've got that 1 up, you've got that 1 AP. Marines, which is why a lot of people are saying about sword and board guys and just a bunch of those. Which is
those are great.
People have experimented with that before, but again, it's just a bunch of bodies slowly.
You're right. Though it's just advancing up the board with a load of bodies. It just isn't that interactive. It's just dull.
You don't have any psychic phase. You don't have any anti-tank apart from your bikes. I built a couple of lists, which I think are all right, to be honest, and I think they'll still do okay. I would personally not see Custodes winning many tournaments anytime soon.
It's interesting. And my other 2 observers, Jamie and Lee, how do you feel about these changes?
As I have a Custodes arm myself, quite disappointed on it, really. Definitely a lot less interesting to play. You know, obviously, I think the movement phase is the most fun phase out of all of them to play. You know, the rest are just rolling dice, to be honest. And taking away all of that mobility from, you know, the plate guy maybe slightly, but also the bikes, you know. I just don't think it's going to be as interesting to face or to play with. So, I think slightly too heavy-handed, but, you know, time will tell.
Yeah. I guess points aren't changed, so you still have the same amount of stuff. I mean, Lee, how have you found playing into Custodes? Where do you think this leaves it as something that you're playing?
I really, really want to go into Custodes now, but I won't, because I actually do agree that it's too much. I personally find Custodes fairly oppressive to play against anyway, and I think they did need a change. But I think, as we were discussing before the podcast started, it was just too much. For instance, why not keep the bikes with the transhuman or the no rerolls, but make it 2 or 3 CP instead? Have it as an option so that you really want to do it. But it just felt like sort of you gave them a kick, and then they fell over. You kicked them a few more times, and then they're like, "Please leave me alone." And then they kicked them a few more times. I think you could have
the offset taking away is a big extra blow.
But there's so many ways you can change that strategy. You can make it once a turn. Yeah. You can make it once a battle round. You can make it once per unit. All of those things are absolutely fine.
Yeah.
Why make it once a battle? I just all of them as well. It's a classic GW thing. Like, if you think about the meta, it's like, okay, these guys are up here, these guys are down here. What you want to do is bring these down a bit and raise these up a bit. You don't want to just
Yeah.
Which is
what they've done here, isn't it? So I mean, like I said, I haven't necessarily had great success playing against Custodes. However, I don't also want to see them wiped off the face of the earth. I think that, but not all doom and gloom, because I don't play them, so I don't know how it really feels. But looking at
I think they're always going to be a tough one to balance, just because of the sheer lack of data sheets in there.
Yes,
it's not like you can raise a couple of units up and drop a couple, because you've got bikes and you've got infantry and you've got Alaris, and that's about it really. It's always going to be a tough codex to balance correctly.
So maybe when the next sets are approved, we'll see a bit of a points drop, and maybe they'll try and sort of they might, because I don't think they look at it and deal with everything at the same time. I think what they do is they say, okay, we'll do this now, and when the next one comes around, we'll change the points, knowing full well that probably they're too heavy-handed now. All right, quote me on that in 6 months when Custodes points go up.
It'd be an interesting one to see. I think they were of all of our sort of quote unquote top armies at the moment. I think they were the one that already felt like they weren't by this point. If that makes sense, like it felt like some other stuff had come out.
Yeah, they were
that already had their number or could have their number in a way.
I mean, they came out absolutely flying, but then they were the first of the really powerful new wave, and now the other ones already feel like they've kind of got their number in a lot of games.
Yeah. Yeah, and a couple of the other changes don't hurt them. Like Indirect getting weaker is good.
Yeah.
And Emperor's Chosen is still 4 up against Mortals.
I thought that might change to 5.
So that's not negligible. That was something that I think a lot of people thought could change. And I in some ways, I'm glad that it hasn't.
Imagine that on top.
There's going to be a lot of mortal wounds out there at the moment with the way things are heading. So it's but it does again. It feels like the classic multiple nerfs, one of which may push it too far. And making 3 stratagems once per game is pretty radical.
It's unusual, isn't it?
Right? I think they did it to Vect. Vect they made once per game, right?
Tide of Traitors is still once per game.
Long time ago.
Yeah. But literally like the odd stratagem from the odd book.
Yeah, 3 and 1 is
3 from 1 feels like a quite a heavy-handed response. Cool, so that's Custodes. We're not optimistic. I'm interested to see, and I've not played Custodes enough, but I still feel like that get in the middle and pounce strategy feels relatively viable into quite a few things, because if you only need one turn, it only needs to work once, right? It does depend a bit what you expose, and it does depend how the terrain is for your bikes to launch from, but I think it's tricky. It's definitely a big hit. So next army we will discuss is the Harlequins. The Harlequins. Short time love of mine, and Harlequins have taken the following hits. Void Weavers now cost 130 points a model. You can still run 9, but to do so will cost you 360 more points than it would have done a little while ago.
I love it.
So it's amazing. It's a huge rise from 90 to 130. Star Weavers have gone up 15 to 95 points. The Favour of Cigarette's Warlord trait now only works in melee. This is the one that lets you turn a hit roll into a 6, which everyone was using on a Death Jester comboed with getting triple exploding 6s, because if you read that rule once and you're a human being, that is the solution you apply it to. And now it seems like they've decided that they just didn't spot that when they wrote the rules, or didn't think about it, and now they're getting rid of it. So now it's a melee exploding 6s thing, or a melee 6 hits thing. So I don't know how useful that leaves Favour of Cigarettes now. And finally, Mirror Architect. This is the pivotal role that gave a minus 6-inch aura around the Shadow Seer. Now it is selecting one Sedath core unit within 9 inches. And until your next command phase, when it selects you, it counts as 6 away. So it's an enormous nerf to Mirror Architect, rendering it, I would argue, almost functionally pointless. Bearing in mind, it costs like 20 points as an upgrade as well. So who wants to wade in on this one? Anyone want to just laugh at Harlequins for a bit first? Anyone want to go to any mocking? Is anyone particularly sad about these changes?
We're all devastated.
Yeah.
They're obviously just been taking over the meta.
Yes.
And then some.
Yeah.
And so I think the Void Weaver change is a really interesting one. I think
it's a huge change. Yeah.
It's just such a huge point swing, and that minus 6-inch thing, which doesn't affect them, just kind of changes how you play them. It changes the it changes the list dynamic, I think. And I think, especially with what we'll discuss later, the Marines, with the kind of the Armour of Contempt, I think it means that normal Harlequins, as you said, we spoke about this earlier, normal Harlequins are not as great in combat anymore, especially into Marines. No. So it means you might well lean into dark, and I think people in general probably lean into dark more and just less Void Weavers. Which I think is quite nice.
Yeah, it's definitely a good thing. I think it makes light boat spam extremely expensive to run. Like losing about 25% of the list if you try and
crazy,
do it,
isn't it?
In the same way, which is a huge change. And as I say, coupled with other changes in here, which do Harlequin. I've played Harlequins outside of running them as Twilight or Dark. Harlequin melee is underwhelming in a lot of situations because you are ultimately relying on damage 2, AP 2, and it doesn't really have anything to offer other than that. There's already a lot of natural counter to that. Now you're effectively relying on damage 1, AP 1 damage 2 a lot of the time. So I think this is going to prompt the inevitable pivot towards Twilight and Dark, probably Dark first and foremost, and bikes. And all the other things that are good in the Harlequins book that haven't yet even merited any explanation. I think they'll be. Yeah, I agree. I think they'll be fine. I think there was so much more to be done with this.
It was kind of boring how it was being played, wasn't it? It was
incredibly boring.
It was just incredibly boring. That's clearly the best thing. I'm just going to do that much as I possibly can. Thanks, Manny.
Yeah, it's literally just a joyless spam build of a thing that was literally like top players were losing like 120 to it all through the team's event. Like no matter what matchup you're going into, the Harlequin player was getting his 100 something.
Not every matchup, Tom. They still can't handle the Disciples of Be'lakor in my one game.
They can't handle the Disciples of Be'lakor in Lee's one game that one time as well.
Yeah, that one time. On record. Thank you.
Yeah, no, there you go. The Disciples of Be'lakor remain the true best army in the game.
And funny enough, they actually have the sort of the light benefit with the -1 to hit no rerolls.
They do. They very much do. So it's an interesting one for Harlequins. I think Harlequins are a bit like Drakari. I think it's going to be kind of whack-a-mole, right? This is the first mole. They've whacked the first mole. Some other horrible mole is going to pop up somewhere else.
I still don't feel like we've seen the true dirty face of Craftbolts yet either. Like, this just opens the door for that, I think.
And I think that in the background to this entire data slate is saying Craftbolts were not weak, right? Craftbolts have been barely touched by this. Indirect, as we'll get to, Indirect hurts them a bit. But actually, not many Craftbolts builds I've seen have been leaning heavily on Indirect. Some have used it, but not isn't it? Shuriken and Aspect Warriors and all the stuff that's that continues to be pretty good in this situation. So I think we will see what Craftbolts are made of. And then, they don't have to. If 9 Void Weavers is less an issue, lots of other armies are going to get to try things and see things. But we'll find out. I'm sure some people will still try it with the updated points, and we'll see if it's still.
Well, they've paid for them now, so they might as well. Yeah. It's not that they can use the ones they paid for because there's no room in the list, but.
Yeah. Mirror Architect feels like the one nerf more than I would have chosen. I think losing the 6-inch range ore is very painful.
Yeah, that's a shame because that's a quite unique, cool rule as well.
Yeah, it's just cool. I think that's the thing, isn't it?
It's really cool unless you play Tau, and then it's really horrible.
Well, the only thing of yours that it really hurt was the no line of sight, right? Because that all lost the range. Your other stuff has longer range, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, all our burst cannons are 18 inches. Flamers are obviously 12.
That's
the flamers. So the high output stuff that our longer range stuff is 1 or 2 shots. Everything that is high output, which you need to kill Harleys, is 18 inches max. So that will definitely help the Tau match up into them.
Definitely renders them, I think, on not heavy terrain boards. I think Harlequins will just evaporate if they don't go first. It's not. Yeah, it really doesn't mitigate much by way of shooting if they don't have it. But we'll see. I think it's the stats on them have been so mental that you just have to hit them really hard and just hope, don't you? Really. And I'll miss the amazing Death Jester that got all the 6s and got all the hits. And it was such an obvious and good combo that I assumed that was what it was written for, Favour of Sacred Ratch, but it doesn't seem like they'd thought of that. So that's just very funny. So that's Harlequins. Will they go away? Probably not. I think the combination of Tyranids coming will probably change their game plan a bit, but they're still going to be out there. They're still going to be rapid. They can still redeploy an Alpha U or hide and not do that depending on the circumstances. So they've got a lot of nice play as usual in the meta, but the melee side will need development, I think, now with those things. Okay, excellent. Next up, the Tau. Montcar has changed so that it now only generates reroll wound rolls of 1. Added AP has, I believe, gone. Can you confirm that, Jamie? Lost the added AP on Montcar. Devastating Counterstrike. This is Farsight Enclave's trait has changed so that you get Markerlight treatment if you are within 9. So that is a shorter range for it to activate, right?
Yep.
Very nice. The core keyword is gone. That brutal core keyword removal has gone to the broadside battlesuits. Battlesuits of the broadside variety have lost core. And finally, essentially the 2 -2 to charge strats now can't combine, right? You can't use both on the same target to give it the old -4 strategy. -4 to charge, which I have had done to me once, and it wasn't pleasant. So, Jamie, you're the Tower expert in this household. Yeah. What does this mean for the fish?
Fish cows. So I think the Montcar -1 AP, I don't think it made a large difference. I mean, a lot of the burst cannon flamer spam lists that were sort of bandied around when the codex first dropped never sort of materialized. So we were thinking, yeah, great, we can have flamers at -2 AP when we're within 18 inches, obviously 12-inch range on the flamers, but having those at AP2 could be devastating, but then people soon realised that, great, now I've got my entire army within 12 inches of someone who's going to slap a lot harder than me. So not necessarily a great idea. So, I don't think we'll mourn the loss of the -1 AP too much, and the reroll wounds of 1, I think I remember to do that about 1 turn a tournament anyway, so it's not going to affect me too much. No. The second one, the Farsight Enclaves decreasing to 9 inches is outrageous in my opinion. Is that the whole concept of a Farsight Enclaves army is let's drop down from deep strike and hit you as hard as we can and try to do catastrophic damage so you can't hit us back. Well, now suddenly we're dropping from deep strike 9 inches away and we can't use our chapter tactic because you must be within 9 inches. So
bizarre.
It's the one change that sort of makes the army play less fluffy than what it's intended, which to me just doesn't make any sense at all. So I think a lot of players may now deviate away from Farsight, which is a shame because they are super cool. But I just can't see why you would take them over anyone else because that sort of sweet spot of landing in 12 inches away or over 9 before less than 12 is just it's just gone. So a little bit salty about that. But also broadsides losing core. I was talking to Chris about this earlier that if they have a 25-point increase each, I think that removes any of the issues they have now. You can't spam them. Suddenly they're 225 points more, I think, if you run 9 of them. So it's just not a feasibility. But removing core just removes so many of the cool abilities they can have. So obviously if you've got Shadow Sun rerolls, in my list I have a squad of 3 plus 4 shield drones, so they're over 6. So I have an ethereal who can give them shoot and do an action, which can no longer happen because they're not core. That used to shore up my home quarter for retrieve Nachman data while my aggressive units go out and take the rest of the board. They can no longer have Exemplar of the Montcar reroll wounds within 12 inches. That was a bit of a crappy one. If you're running a Tau Sept list, they can no longer have the counters having a marker light from Long Strike, which was another one that was a bit like, well, it's not great. They can't no longer have the 5-foot Feel No Pain from the Ethereal from his Sense of Stone. There's just so many things
it's
that you
huge
think,
amount of implications.
There's so many buffs that you were putting on them regularly, and you just think, well, I don't think it really improves the game from the other person's point of view, and you've just removed so many options from the game. So I think a points increase probably gets the same effect, but still enables more options for someone. I'm a little bit grumpy about that because I don't think broadsides are really going to see much play now, which is disappointing because they are super cool models. And it's now 100 points for a model that hits on 4s. You can't really get any rerolls hits, any reroll wounds.
You won't see them.
No, and the indirect obviously got a hit as well, which needed. It was crazy amount of indirect and how accurate they were in the Tau list. But that model itself just took a hit from both ends, and unfortunately will just disappear in obscurity for another edition.
It's a shame because they're such great models.
The broadside is epic.
Apparently.
Broadside is an epic model.
Yeah. And then
sorry, after you carry on.
I was just going to go on to the charges, the -2 charges. It removes a bit of fun play you can have with interweaving your infantry and battlesuit models to, try and plug that -4 to charge, but I don't think it's going to change a lot. I don't think very often I was running a lot of infantry. Not many people were running breaches and strikes. A lot of it was crisis spam and crew screens. So I don't think people are going to miss that too much. And also, it was a bit crazy that you could get a -6 to charge if someone was in a forest and they also hit the 2 strats. And you're like, great, now my 7-inch charge is unassailable. Yeah, so. But no, overall, I think Tau got off very lightly. A couple of the universal special rule style changes affected us more than what the actual codex specific ones did. So yeah, I'm not too disappointed by it at all, really. Just probably one of my favourite units in the broadsides got hit slightly too hard. Yeah. But I don't mind having to change your list. I think change is good for us all, just to improve as players. But when it's your favourite sub-faction and probably your favourite unit, it hurts a little.
Yeah. And you don't really want to see whole units taken out of the game, right? That shouldn't typically be the goal with these changes. You want them to still be viable in some capacity. I'm going to briefly unpack the changes to Indirect because I think it's relevant whilst we're talking about Tau, just to explain how that's kind of packaged together, and then I'll get the others, all of us non-Tau playing chumps will weigh in on the overall combined effect of those changes. So Indirect Fire has changed thus. If it's targeting something that is not visible to the bearer, then the ballistic skill is worsened by 1. And the defending unit gets +1 to its armor saving throws, and Astra Militarum models are not affected by these changes. So Indirect is less accurate. It is also less deadly. And that, I think, is an important one to take in conjunction with the other changes to Tau, isn't it? Very much so. So Chris and Lee, as people who play into Tau, what do we think? Where does this leave them?
I've played into Tau a lot recently. And I think it's definitely swung the matchup in Tau's favour because of the Custody nerf. I think, as Jamie says, the -2 to charge buff, all those sorts of things are just irritants to Tau, but you've got quite a lot of stuff in the book. There's a lot of powerful things there. You still get your rerolls elsewhere, especially on all those crisis suits. They're not super.
So crisis suits are still very good off the back of this.
I mean, I've played into Tau so many times, and those broadsides light up, and they can do so much work. But as a Custodes player, I've got smashed by Tau by things which aren't the broadsides, and actually it's the broadsides that have whiffed. It's the weight of fire that does it. So I don't think, I think it's in terms of the Tau versus Custodian matchup, which is obviously one we were seeing a lot about a month ago. I think the Tau probably is stronger into that matchup, but that's more in sight of the Custody debuffs. I think the indirect thing's really interesting because I think people will just now kind of go away from it and not want to take it, which will make life a lot easier for a lot of the armies out there, especially like the T3 ones, those that want to hide and all that sort of thing. I think they're now obviously not as worried about indirect, but also the indirect has been nerfed, so you just won't see it. So I think actually overall that is definitely better. In terms of indirect, I do feel sorry for probably one of the worst indirect units in the game, which is the Admech Disintegrator. It was something which people were taking all the time in 8th. And then in 9th, it was like, it's not that great. People did try, Seagull won LVO with it. And I saw someone else recently got to the final of the GT running 2. But now you're definitely never going to see a Disintegrator ever again.
What's the AP on it?
1.
So nothing.
So none. Now none.
AP nothing.
Yeah, the Orc Squig Bugger gets hit pretty badly by this as well because they're already not that accurate and they're
I think see you soon, John Scrivens.
I think the one thing that they were trying to hit with the indirect was Tau, and yet Tau have the most mobile indirect platform in the game insofar as the crisis are moving 10, they can auto advance 8 with a cold star. So they're moving 18 inches. So only need one of those models to see the unit for the whole squad to then not get hit by the debuffs. So I think they've inadvertently ruined a lot of units in the game and not really hit Tau that hard.
Yeah, because Tau can still have so much of it, right? And for not that much by way of points, that if all you need it for is bullying the odd little hidden thing,
you're still going to have to do that. You can
absolutely still do that, right? You've still got the resource. Yeah, whereas what gets completely damaged is like the token artillery piece, or the one, the odd whirlwind, or the odd Scorpius, or the odd night spin, or whatever else it is that now basically just isn't going to be good at what it's supposed to be doing, and is priced as if it might be good at what it's supposed to be doing. Because it's not just a 5-point, 10-point weapon upgrade; it's a whole flipping vehicle designed to do that thing.
Yeah. GW obviously told us this was happening because they gave Plagueburst Crawlers a points drop in the last points update.
That was alluding to this. I think Plagueburst Crawlers will probably still be fine.
You don't really take them for the mortar anyway.
No, they just sort of sit there, don't they? And the mortars will still add that sense of time pressure without being quite as dangerous as they were.
I would just like to add that I hate indirect fire.
Likewise.
And I am very glad to see the changes. I think that it's just not a fun way to play. So I'm glad to see it go. I think that there's very rarely a time that I think that's a cool mechanic about it. Yeah, so no violin for me on this one.
I think it sort of ran hand in hand with Bodyguard. Because Bodyguard existed, you kind of needed Indirect to threaten the unit behind to stop the shenanigans of Bodyguard. Now Bodyguard's gone, Indirect going is not a problem. Like, as a Tau player, the one rule I hated more than anything was Bodyguard, because as soon as Trajan sat on that objective with Warden behind, there's nothing I could do.
So it's like a chip on the shoulder here, Jamie.
Yeah, well, I hate Bodyguard, and yet in my army I ran a squad of 5 Crisis Bodyguards because the rule is so oppressive that you have to utilise it. So I'm not disappointed by the nerf to Indirect or Bodyguard at all.
So a wonderful segue that you've teed us up with there, because we can now talk about the Bodyguard rule. The Bodyguard rule straightforwardly doesn't exist in the same way at all now.
Basically, the
phenomenon of characters being hidden by stuff hidden behind walls is over, because all it now means is that the character can use Lookout Sir from a unit even as it drops down below 3 models. So they keep providing basic character protection if they're in front of something, but they cease to help it out in the same way as they did, which is pretty massive.
It's huge.
Right? I mean, snipers genuinely can snipe again, as far as I can see, because that's not going to be stopped by it. And it means a lot of armies which had little plays around having characters stuck out on a limb in front of stuff and stuff hiding.
Sisters.
Can't do that. Yeah. Sisters very guilty of that. Tau a bit guilty of that. Custodes can do that.
They've got a hand but don't really.
It's a big change. Characters just solo charging stuff and not getting overwatched as well. Doesn't work in quite the same way. I just had someone do that to me at the team's event. Fuck off. Horrible. Get out of here with your slith protected Archon not getting overwatched. So it's I mean, that's another thing. Has anyone ever enjoyed that mechanic? I don't think anyone does. I think it's a rubbish mechanic.
Yeah. It feels wrong. Logically it doesn't make any sense.
Even as you're abusing it, you just feel wrong for doing it.
Yeah.
But you're like, sorry, this rule exists, so I've got to use it.
Yeah. I hate rules like that. So
yeah.
And in some ways, it's a surprise that one's lasted as long as it has through the edition, really, because it's not been popular at any stage. But
it's not been a great edition, Tom.
Big changes. Big changes in terms of the basic fundamentals of how the game plays that I think are probably all positive.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's
we are moving in a good direction with those.
Yeah. And then another surprise change, and one of perhaps the biggest, is this big old change called Armour of Contempt, which the implications of which are too wide-ranging to necessarily track, but we'll try. And it runs thus: each time an attack is allocated to an Adeptus Astartes, Sanctic Astartes, Heretic Astartes, or Adeptus Sororitas model, worsen the AP characteristic of that attack by 1. Doesn't apply to Storm Shields, Relic Shields, Combat Shields. Doesn't apply to Sacrosanct Shields or Force Shielded units. That's Nemesis, Dread Knights, Sacrosancts. And models that are under the effects of other rules that worsen or reduce AP don't apply to this either. So that
feels big to me. That feels big.
It's an enormous fucking handout of AP reduction.
And like you said earlier, that was not on my radar at all.
That was not on my radar. That was not anything anyone was saying was going to happen. But I suppose it makes sense, doesn't it? Because every army that benefits from this has been getting done over in recent times. So I suppose
it was definitely needed. And it actually feels right now, it feels early to say, but a fairly elegant way of giving them a little buff.
Yeah. If you've gone as far as putting too much AP over everything, it absolutely is. It's one way of getting out. I mean, the other way would have been not to put all that AP on stuff in the first place.
Every basic trick in the game now.
We're way past that.
We all know
now,
the psychology of game design is bigger numbers are better. So you keep selling bigger numbers, and that's what they've done here.
Yeah. But it's it's quite enormous. There are a couple of little caveats that came with it. Salamander's got a little buff because that obviously sort of negates the Salamander's trait. So they've got now their trait is you can't reroll wound rolls against them, and the same was applied to Sister's Valorous Heart, I think.
Yeah,
which is one I actually really like. Valorous Heart. It's a very cool little sub faction that Sisters have. So it's interesting. What do we think this does? Does this completely shake things up in terms of all the sort of power armored armies that are getting helped out by this?
I think it makes Terminators pretty interesting.
Terminators pretty spicy.
I think Grey Knights. You got Paladins.
Yeah.
With their Armour of Contempt or something. The whatever the extra save.
+1 save. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Paladin bombs could be a thing.
Yeah. Resilience.
You've got Sisters. You've got Junith. You see Ebon Chalice or something. Mm-hmm. She gives you all the armor save. So you put all of your Sisters on 2-ups, and then they're ignoring AP1.
Oh dear!
I think that's quite fun.
That's great.
I think it also makes Paragon War suits a bit more interesting as well.
They're 2-ups, aren't they?
Yeah. So I think those sorts of things. I think it potentially gives people the opportunity to try things, I think, which is all we want. Really.
That above all else is the most interesting thing, isn't it? I completely agree.
Good? Who knows? But I think people are going to be, are we Blood Angels, your, Sanguinary Guard sitting on cover. They're on like a 1-up or 2.
1-up ignoring AP1, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So have fun with that. So I think it's
good for Vanguard vets as well, because everyone's running Vanguard vets at the moment with Lightning Claws and a Storm Shield, and now you're thinking, well, do I need that Storm Shield, or can I save points, add more stuff in, or double claws and increase your attacks? Fighty. So it just increases the amount of options people can start thinking about. It's just great for the game.
Yeah, I think that's what's nice about it. It's going to provoke some creativity and amongst armies and factions that we've not been seeing much out of for a while. So that's really exciting. What do you think, Lee?
I think it's good. I don't think it's enough really to push the balance of power, but I do think it's enough to, like the guys have said here, to make it interesting for a little while, and you might start to see some stuff that you don't often see. I think there's some very good candidates for what could really abuse that. I think Terminators is a great example of that. Whether or not that means you're going to start. Dogs here. Whether or not you're going to start to see, classic Space Marine vehicle stuff, I don't think you will. I think that it's still not enough for that. But you know what?
Land Raiders.
Yeah, Land Raider meta's coming. I will tell you after Saturday when I run 9 vehicles in my games. So. Or Heretic Astartes. And I thought what was really interesting, and it's a bit of a debate we had earlier, was how the Death Guard and Thousand Suns still have Heretic Astartes. Or at least Thousand Suns. So I think someone told me that Death Guard don't.
Yeah, no, I thought they didn't.
I thought Death Guard just had Bubonic Astartes,
which is really interesting. And I wonder.
Which it says on Battlescribe, yeah, but I think in the Codex they do still have both.
Yeah.
So I was told earlier.
So obviously you get.
Does that mean Mortarion is now getting a +1?
Yeah. Although 3-up ignoring 1.
Yeah, exactly. Magnus ignoring 1. I mean, who cares anyway? But on those rubrics, on those Terminators, and on the toughness 5 Death Guard bodies, I mean, it's interesting. It really is.
Yeah.
Looking at my Black Templar, I was like, oh yeah, this could be a thing again.
And it pushes it back to a situation where the stuff that really, really kills things will still kill them.
But it's the
incidental stuff. Yeah. I mean, because that's what's been depressing about the edition is the way that, power armor guys just fall over to like some basic set of like knife attacks or little, small arms fire. And that's
flesh borers now are going to be super scary. It's like, what? AP1 flesh borers? No. Not everything has to kill stuff. Yeah.
They're like heavy bolters now.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand from GW is that it seems to feel like everything has to kill stuff in the game. It's like, no, I don't think that's...
Bigger numbers sell more things.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. So it's an interesting one. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how those different things stack up. I think Grey Knights feels quite spicy. Sisters potentially feels quite spicy.
Yeah. Grey Knights is interesting because of Tide of Shadows as well.
Yeah,
so
exactly that.
Being a 2-up and then ignoring AP1.
And Grey Knights only really went away because Indirect was hurting them so badly, right? So all these changes in conjunction.
That's really interesting.
Inject a bit of life into Grey Knights, I think. And if there was anything coming out in a moment that leaned very heavily on casts and mortal wounds, then they might be able to do something about that as well. But I guess we will see. It's an interesting one. Looking forward to seeing if Grey Knights do return because I am a big fan of them.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Excellent. Cool. Right, well, we'll run through to our little sleeper buffs. There's a handful of sleeper buffs. Death Guard got Obsec on their Blight Lords and their Death Shroud.
I think this is huge.
Yeah.
Having played Death Guard and also played My Thousand Suns, where they do already have Obsec, I always looked at them and thought, well, Blight Lords and Death Shroud are better in every way, apart from they're not Obsec. And now they've got it. I'm like, happy days. Let's take that back.
In an army that I think played well and played in the right way can already be a huge problem, Obsec wise, right? I think Poxwalkers especially. Yeah. It's just the fact that the wave after the Poxwalkers is also Obsec is scary. I think it's
excited
definitely
to see
scary. That. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, Death Shroud Blight Lord heavy list would be awesome as well.
Which is how I ran it, so I'm tempted to.
Yeah, try it and see. I think super cool. Gives them a lot of mission play and makes removing.
I just wish they were
harder.
fearless as well, but that might be asking too much.
Yeah, greedy. Take what you're given.
Yes, it is.
What other buffs did we see? We saw a little buff for Sisters. So Sisters get a miracle dice at the start of each turn. I believe that's rather than battle round, right? So a slight increase in miracle dice. This rule change is called the Sorry About Strands of Fate rule.
Yeah.
And as I say, Valorous Heart have now moved to a wound not being re-rollable, which I think is interesting as well. So yeah, little buffs for Sisters, I think. In and amongst it, is that enough? I think. Does that make Sisters interesting enough?
Not for me.
Maybe coupled with
because they lose some of the stuff like the Bodyguard as well.
Losing the Bodyguard, which was a huge thing for them.
Yeah.
Does it counter it? Probably not. But yeah, it's funny because we were literally, me and other Jamie were actually chatting about how ridiculous it was that Miracle Dice was so much weaker than Strategy. So it's a good recognition.
Surprised they've done it. That's quite uncharacteristic for them to change something like that. So good on them for once.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think it'd be interesting. I mean, Sisters have a lot of 3-up and a lot of 2-up armor in that book, right? So I think the other Armour of Contempt change definitely helps. But as you say, it's just hard to actually imagine how they play right now with the Bodyguard rule gone, because I can't remember a game I have played against Sisters in the last year that didn't completely hinge on the way that rule was exploited and the way that I got around it or didn't get around it. Essentially, so it's a big change.
Yeah, definitely hurts more than Val.
Oh yeah,
he weren't seeing that much anyway.
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
No, he won't be.
And finally, this is the wild card, right? This is the one where it's like, has all hell broken loose? I'm curious, and it's Astra Militarum. It's the Imperial Bloody Guard, and so they've gained a rule called Hammer of the Emperor, which is if all your armies drawn from the same regiment, every time you make a ranged attack, and a modified hit roll of a 6 automatically wounds the target.
This really scares me, and I don't know if it should or not yet.
As a Chaos player, it should.
Yeah,
with Vince Arcadia.
I've always hated Guard. Chris now gets it. He played My Thousand Suns at an event and he went into Guard. He's like, I finally get it. This is terrifying to me. I don't know if that's Battle Scars.
Leaf blower just rings in my head. That's what I hear. I just hear the words. And I feel like the other little change, there's two minor changes which we'll just rattle off. Infantry orders become an aura, essentially, I think.
Yeah, I think that was on the previis data slate, wasn't it? Where you
was it? Is that already there?
To one, and then it's 6 inches of the one you pass
okay.
it to.
So that was already there. Then the other change is that war gear cost for infantry squads has been reduced to nothing. So free war gear for your infantry.
Feels like 7th edition all over again for what Space Marines had.
It is a funny one, that, because on one level quite scary, and on another level, every time I've ever played with an army like that or played against an army like that, I have been, the conclusion you come to is like, there's no point having those things on the unit, right? There's no point having it because it does so little.
The last cannon hitting on a 5.
And so you really are in territory where it's like, it's that negligible that maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't.
I don't know why, but I've got this. You know when Admech had the auto win on 4s?
Yeah.
I feel like we're going to see something similar with Guard. But obviously, it's not quite as good, but so much more volume.
Yeah.
It does scare me.
It's a lot of free flamers for Overwatch, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Oh, no.
Don't do that to me.
Imagine Gene Stealer cults now trying to charge into free flamers. It's like...
No. Not going to
charge.
I just won't. Just not going to charge. Just die instead.
So yeah, it probably won't amount to much, but I mean, who knows? It has the potential to go huge.
Yeah, it's just so killy.
It's just so many shots though.
Yeah,
like 1,000 points, you can have like 180 guardsmen, and all of those shots are auto wounding or sixes.
But you've got to move 100 bodies.
There's no non-vehicle stipulation there.
No. Or those manticores and everything that are not now suffering the -1 or anything like that for indirect.
And the Wyverns are putting out 4d6
because that's the other
shots.
thing. They're not affected by the indirect changes. They've got good artillery that's also now going to start auto wounding stuff. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's whether they can kill enough, because they still die just as easily. So it's whether they can kill enough.
That's it. So they still have the same clunkiness that is their main issue, right? Too easily outmaneuvered and
bogged
down.
And
trapped. Yeah. That doesn't go away just because you're better at shooting.
Which is great, because that's how a tank army would function, isn't it? It would get bogged down and that would be it.
Yeah. It just makes that chance of the final lasgun shot killing something big all the more
cinematic moments, maybe. So that's good.
Yeah, cinematic moments, which is what we want. So
what we don't want is Balance getting killed by 15 rangers in one turn of shooting.
No, we don't want that. That's a sad time.
Vanguard,
sorry.
So
that's pretty cinematic.
That essentially takes us to the end. Those are all the key changes. So I guess I'm now going to open it up to our panel of experts. What happens now? What sorts of implications do you think we're going to see from this? What are the short-term consequences of this likely to be? And out of 10, how happy are you with this Balance Dataslate?
Well,
Chris first.
Yeah, Chris first.
I think it's a solid. I think the balance is a solid 7 out of 10. I think lots of armies have got buffs which are needed. I think the nerfs to 2 of the 3 armies were good. And in my opinion, over the next however many months it is, 3 months, I think Tyranids are just going to smash the living hell out of everyone. I think Harleys and Eldari will be there. I think Goonhammer's competitive innovations will be Harlequins or Azarani versus Tyranids, or Tyranids versus Tyranids in all their showdown.
Tyranids good stuff.
I think, Tyranids good enough. Here we go. But there's so many different builds for Tyranids, I'm sure. I think so these are just going to be a mid-table gatekeeper. I think you're going to see. I mean, you mentioned to us, Tom, about Terminus Est.
Yeah.
Or Bodyguard. I think there will be some builds which
you've got to try that, right?
Not good enough to win events into the top players using NIDs.
Yeah.
Especially if Crusher stays. But I think those sorts of armies will be horrible to play against for everyone.
I totally agree.
They'll regularly be going 4-1 at events.
Yeah, just because it's just, can you deal with it?
It's just so hard to deal with, isn't it?
Yeah.
You've got Dark Angels. Have they got a little spike now? We know Paul likes to think so, but then still their phases for
Mass Deathwing was already difficult to deal with, right? Difficult to deal with.
Exactly. I think the mid-table brawl has become very interesting now. There's an epic game of rock, paper, scissors. But my main concern is that, it'll depend. Can Tal deal with NIDs? I think that's probably going to be one of the big things. Can I shoot off the table? No pressure, Jamie. And otherwise, I think it's going to be, we've gone from Town Custodes to Harlequins to NIDs. That's how I think it will bounce, unless Tal can.
Do you think can Admech muster enough shooting to deal with NIDs?
I don't know. I know they got to the final recently or something, and you could spam Vanguard and just be auto wounding on 6s. And that could but you've got limited AP.
But then if you're doing that, you might as well go guard and auto wound on 6s with
a
cheaper
guard the
bodies.
enemy to NIDS now. Can guard do it?
Maybe
straight in there.
That's pretty cinematic, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we want to see.
It could be a nice three-way scrap at the top. Tau can maybe take out Nids. Nids will walk over Harleys, and Harleys are an absolute hard counter to Tau. There's very little Tau can do to deal with that. So, it may well be a three-way brawl at the top, which would keep things interesting.
It depends entirely on how strong Nids are. I mean, I've not played against them. I can only go by what I've heard. But from what I've heard, it's if their best build and Crush is allowed, it's
especially if Crusher stays, which this data slate has not resolved, hasn't given us any closure on that.
Yeah.
Jamie, what do you think? What are you seeing?
I'm still really hopeful, and from Tau point of view, obviously a little bit disappointed on my sub-faction and favourite unit, but as a rule, I don't think the army's strength has been neutered at all. It's just that the current top boys in Harleys are a hard counter to them, and I mean, I faced off against Paul's Dark list, which didn't run a single Void Weaver, and he tabled me, and I'd killed probably 200-300 points. It was just scary. I mean, there was one turn when I shot probably 1,500 points at 1 Star Weaver, and it was still left on 1 wound. They're just that difficult for Tau to take out. So it could well be a rock, paper, scissors at the top, and that's definitely better than where we sit currently with Harleys just walking over everyone and it being a very dull time. But obviously, we don't want to rule out Asiani because they are spicy.
Oh, definitely.
So no, I'm looking forward to the next sort of 3 months, and I think GW are obviously showing that they're interested in attempting balance, whether they achieve it or not. But they're trying, which is all we can ask for. And I don't think Nids will be scary for too long because they're trying to keep people happy.
Yeah. And Lee?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really add much to the guys haven't already said. If I was to give you my out of 10 rating for how happy I am with the data slate, it would be a 10. On the basis that they've actually done one. And it's the intent. The content of it, almost irrelevant insofar as I'm just happy that they're actually trying to address it. If I had to actually give it a thing to the content, I'd give it 11 because of how sad it's made Chris. No. I actually think that it's gone too far. And I think that some of the indirect nerfs, even to indirect shooting, which isn't what I actually meant, also affects units that they probably didn't necessarily intend. So we kind of alluded earlier with Orcs, for instance, with their indirect now being essentially worthless. It's a bit of a shame. I do think all those armies need to be taken down, and I think that armies that need help did get some. Whether or not that's enough, I don't know. What I do think is it does open the door for Nids to just walk on through and take the crown now. And I don't think, other than Tau, really, there's anything that looks to me an obvious challenger to that. Based on sort of the musings I'm hearing from people playing it, the amount of mortal wounds that are coming out, the amount of bodies they can get, the durability that they get. I'm not seeing it a natural challenger for that, but I think it'll be very, very interesting with the next set of books that come, which will be the Knights. I think that might have something to say about it.
Are you surprised the Lord of Change didn't get another nerf?
Should be at least 250 points by now, I would think.
Yeah.
Any unit that's 300 points and needs your only relic and only warlord trait to be half what usable to still not do anything. I mean,
but he does look sexy.
It does look great.
He does. And he's not been hurt by any of these changes, being neither an artillery piece nor a space marine or anything.
I was going to say, all these things don't really help me in any way because I just fry Ironbones all the time. So, and I'm already -1 to hit most of the time when I'm playing into cycles.
What was your out of 10, by the way, Jamie, for the slate? What do you rate it?
I would say 8. I think
8.
Obviously my sub-faction and unit is annoying, and also Custodes I think that is disappointing because I just don't think we'll really see him anymore.
Exactly.
We still have the die-hard fans, but I think everyone will all the 50-50 players will just slowly drift away from them, which is disappointing.
What we were seeing over the events recently was you were getting a somewhat healthy mix at the top. But you still sometimes had Drakari hanging about. You had Harlequins, you had Tau, and you had Custodes, and then a smattering of other bits. But now I just think you won't see that anymore. It's going to be sort of a 2-horse, maybe 3-horse race.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Drakari, where Drakari sit in all of this, I'm not entirely sure. I think Drakari need to see what.
I love how they're still hanging in there. By the way, oh my god!
If Harleys pivot to melee, Drakari will like that because Drakari fight dirtier than Harlequins. But I mean, everything fighting on death is the issue. That Drakari have enough stuff that they can say, well, yeah, you can kill that, but that'll kill you, and I'll still have stuff and you won't. But it'd be interesting to see how that fits in. I think having a go with Drakari into this stuff and GSC to a lesser extent into this stuff as well is going to be interesting. Seeing what can be done. I'm going to give it a 9 because then we've all given it different numbers, which is fun, from 7 all the way up to 10.
Overwhelmingly positive, really.
I like it because I feel like they will accidentally have created at least 3 different monsters with the scale of what they've tried to do, especially with the AP change thing. And I think the game thrives when they've accidentally created massive problems in lots of different directions at once. And that feels good. Rather than one problem being created every new book and fucking everyone else over, which is what we've currently got. They're like, what if we gave people license to go and find 10 different horrific things at once and see what happens? And so the overall competitive scene will be better if there are 10 people bringing some horrible, weird thing that they haven't intended than just everyone bringing the latest book.
I probably agree.
They haven't intended.
I'd really like to see Manny get David. I'd like to see Manny get David to paint up 250 guardsmen now, just to see it.
Yeah, so that'll be an interesting one. And I think very heavy-handed treatment of Custodes, probably appropriate treatment of Harlequins and Tau. And just big changes with Bodyguard and Indirect.
I like the changes to the universal rules probably more than the ones for this faction specific.
Yeah. No, definitely, and it's and having all of these things at once is where it gets very spicy. Yeah. So we'll let you know. The internet
is on fire today, isn't it? With these, which is great.
It's alive. It's great. There's people writing salamanders lists. It's all sorts. It's crazy.
Mark comes out there somewhere.
I literally this very morning in a chat, someone told me they wanted to start playing salamanders, and I said, there is honestly no point. And then within several hours, there probably is a point now.
Tiny one.
Yeah, who knows? I don't know. It's interesting. No re-rolling wounds, +1 save, who knows? But very, very interesting. We will see. We'll have to see how it all plays out. And we have Tyranids looming. What's Tyranids going to do to it all?
The Great Devourer.
The Great Devourer is on the horizon now, and then Knights after that. So exciting times. Get out there and try stuff. Find out what works.
Yeah.
And let us know. This has been a special Balance Dataslate edition of the 6+++